Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Pair and a Spare podcast. Yes, I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan. Might not sound like him. We've got Ryan Burns from GopherIllustrated.com and Chip Scoggins from Football Across Minnesota and the Star Tribune. We are presented, as always, by our great partners at Jack's Cafe, jaxcafe.com. I'll start with this, guys. As I was storming the court, Gophers, Oregon on Saturday.
Is this before or after your second pack of Camel Blues?
Yeah, my Parliament Lights. Oh, that sounds good. That takes me back. I should do like the old newsman and just smoke a cigarette while we do this show. I was born in the wrong generation. Maybe I lost my voice because I was screaming as the Gophers knocked off 15th ranked Oregon at the barn on Saturday at Williams. But as I'm walking up and losing my children, have no idea where they are. A couple of nice young gentlemen said, "Is this going to make the podcast on Tuesday?" Is this going to make the podcast? I said, "I'm sure it will." They said, "I see Chip's here. He must be working on a project." I said, "He's always working on a project." But, the Pair and a Spare yesterday at the Target Center doing the Skyway Showcase, somebody came up, knocked on the glass, said, "I love the Pair and a Spare pod." I said, "Thank you, sir. Tell a friend." So it's spreading, gentlemen. It's spreading.
Yeah, I got that too. I was at the game. A little teaser. I was hanging out with Taylor Heisey for a Taylor Heisey big piece, and obviously she's a longtime girlfriend of Parker Fox. And
she had to like what she saw.
Yeah, it was cool. And kind of, I'll let you read it, but I was standing out there at the halftime talking to her, and somebody walks by and asked me if my phone was at 100%.
You guys are such celebrities.
For most normal people that have to stand by us, it is awkward when someone asks me in front of my kids, they're like, "Why do they care so much about your phone?" I'm like,
I know.
I can't explain it, buddy. I'll explain it to you someday.
I don't know what I'm more distraught by right now. Chip actually telling the public about one of his projects, which is very big news for you. We're very proud of you, Chip.
Yeah.
Or the milk and cigarettes dad on top there, where, again, his Camel Blues loses his children on top of the court. Like, we're just off to a rousing start here on the Pair and a Spare.
Well, this isn't so much a project as it was just kind of an offbeat column that's a little longer than normal column. But, it's a football podcast, but we can talk Gopher basketball for a minute. I mean, I'm happy for Ben Johnson and the team that, I got to be honest, when it was 0-6 and after that Ohio State debacle at the end, you're wondering where this thing's going to go. And they've showed some toughness. They showed toughness in that Oregon game. I mean, there were a couple moments where Oregon made that run. I'm like, all right. It was, they hung in there, but I mean, they made plays. Dawson was great. And, this applies to all college sports. I think more so in basketball with this transfer portal, when you're constantly remaking your team every year, I think sometimes it just takes a while for things to come together and figure out who does what well. How do you play together? It feels like that team is figuring out how to play together, a bunch of new parts, and they've always played hard, right? I don't think that's ever been like an issue. But I just think they're figuring it out, how to play together.
Yes, yeah. I mean, especially when you're all, for lack of a better term, for some of these guys, 1-year mercenaries with changing schools every year. It's going to take a little bit of time to figure it out. Now, I think there were some times in that December-January stretch where I was watching going like, are they actually trying as hard as they possibly can in some of the doldrums there? But they have certainly reversed course here these last 3 games, and now they get to face a team today who I don't believe has lost a Big Ten game yet.
They have not.
Yeah.
No, the Fighting Izzos of Michigan State, they are back in the top 10, where we've been since I was in 8th grade. You see this play hard towel over here. I probably got it in that generation. Izzo's been coaching since then. I was a 7th or 8th grader when that dude started, and he's still kicking it in East Lansing.
When are you going to put your 3rd game ball behind you, by the way?
Yeah.
We usually get them in the spring.
Okay.
It takes a while. It takes a while to paint them. Yeah, I think you're right, Chip. Well, look at the Timberwolves. Like I always say, the Timberwolves made this seismic trade. They still haven't figured it out. 50 games in, they're professionals. It's like, what chance do a lot of these college teams have? And by the way, Mike Mitchell was hurt for 2 months. Like It's not a program that can withstand a lot of bad luck. I've said that for many, many years.
Yeah, guys, so what year are we talking about with Gopher basketball?
Guys like Burnsie don't believe me. They just light up the message boards and blah, blah, blah. You can't. They have a small margin for error. And by the way, you're right.
Yeah.
The 3 transfers, you watch the tape from them. I'm thinking about Femi. I'm thinking about Lukai.
Yeah.
And then obviously Frank Mitchell. Completely different players than they were 2 months ago.
Yeah, Femi, obviously had a huge game the other day. And, it's funny, like you watch them during the, when they were at rock bottom there earlier and like, man, I just don't know how much talent they have on this team. Is it, they're close, some of these games and, but they just have to, because I think Ben was getting after him. There's one game where the effort wasn't there. And, it's like, is it the effort or are they just not that talented? Right. Yeah, just not, they don't have enough talent. I just think the other thing is, man, there's something to be said about confidence and just
for sure
getting a win and feeling good, and then that snowballs. Man, confidence is everything. And they just looked, not to say they're going to go in and East Lansing and win tonight, but the last 3 games they've just looked like a more confident team. When you can do that, your talent level shows up a little bit more than when you're beaten down and everything's going bad for you. So, anyways, that was a fun day at the barn. I've always been jealous since I've been here. I've been here 25 years, and I've never really experienced the barn. And there's been moments I've been in there a couple of times last year. It's like, okay, I understand what all you originals,
all you old heads,
all you originals, all you Minnesotans are talking about. And I always wished I could have been in there during the Clem days, the good old days when that thing was rocking. And
I love that phrase. God,
previously,
that's just my favorite phrase. When the barn is rocking, that's just my favorite phrase.
Yeah, I say that the only thing people love to talk about more than when the barn is hopping is the 1991 Halloween blizzard.
Yeah,
not that I can always bring it back to that.
Gaardsy will never argue with that. Yeah,
but even you guys were talking on the pre-production meeting. I mean, Gaardsy, you're driving in and you can tell the vibe of what's happening inside the barn.
Yep.
On the radio, and that was one of those days where it was finally hopping a little bit. I listened to the game on radio to Mike Grimm, and you could even hear it from Parker Fox afterwards, just talking about this is why I came back. I mean, he said those exact words verbatim, was to play in an atmosphere like this. And again, you got to take the small wins for a team like that.
Take them when they come. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, and it is. I grew up going in that building, right? I've said it. I'm probably the last generation that truly cares about it, because I remember, like, when you walked in and you walk up the steps and there's that anticipation and the lights are bright and the rafters are full. Like, I do remember all that. But I'm 42 years old. Like Chip said, he's been here since 2000 basically, and that you've never really experienced it where every game felt. And there's a million reasons why. That's what we've all gone over them a million times. But crowds matter. I mean, we've always said it. And the student section really since COVID, for all the sports, for hockey, for basketball, and certainly for football, I don't know if they felt left out, in 2020 and 2021, or certainly 2020 when nobody could go. But once they got back into these buildings, it really does drive everything. And we're seeing it. Hockey sold out this week. And now hockey's in a different spot. They're a top 5 team. They're great, right?
Yeah.
But they're sold out against Wisconsin. Their student section's unbelievable. Football student section was great again all season long. And so even when it's not full, like it wasn't on Saturday, they drive it. And it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. You took the words out of my mouth. That started with the student section. It was a great student section because, I've been there for other games this season. And just, some of it was because of winter break. They weren't on campus. But the student section was great Saturday. And they set the tone, no matter football, basketball, whatever. The student section sets the tone. And football's particularly done a really good job with cultivating that. And being back on campus obviously was the biggest thing of it, even though it's not a long drive it still matters. It still matters that you
had to get on a bus. I remember.
Yeah, you can walk across campus. Yeah. So, but yeah, the students showed up Saturday, and that just it creates the vibe. It absolutely does.
Well, and I'll say this because I'm always on people about we've talked about ticket prices forever and how we've all talked, Chip, Burnsie. I don't think you were part of it, but the infamous Norwood Teague meetings that we all had when they were raising the prices. And I remember being young at that point. Now, I probably shouldn't be speaking to the athletic director like that, but going, you guys know this is a horrific idea, right? Like this is not going to go over well. It's just not going to go over well right now. Whether you think you're underpriced or not, I'm just telling you, it's not going to go over well. I think I ran into you walking into my meeting. You and Joe
Burnsie, that's what they did. Like they brought in every outlet came in one after another, and he had a consultant from somewhere. I don't even know where the guy was from.
Yep, it was a consultant.
And he brought and they told us this, and I'm just sitting there. I told him, I said, "No, not going to work.
It's not going to go over well.
This is going to backfire." And he was saying, "This is the sign of the times. This is what college we have to do. We have to be competitive. We got to do this." I'm like, "Okay, good luck to you."
They lost a lot of people there. And by the way, in the grand scheme of things, I appreciate the aggressiveness because those guys did come in here and shake a lot of stuff up. We know it ended horrifically, right? But they finally just said, we're building Athletes Village. Whether we have the money or not, we're building it. We're behind. We have to do it. So it wasn't all negative, but I remember being like, this is just not going to play, mostly because it was just such a dramatic increase so quickly.
And the timing of it too was part of it.
Yep, because they were coming off the Citrus Bowl year, and even though that had nothing to do with it, they had been planning that for a couple of years. It still doesn't matter because once the narrative gets set, oh, you go to one January 1 bowl, and now you're basically doubling my tickets in 3 years. And they did it for hoops, they did it for hockey. We saw what happened. But the reason I bring that up is because Coyle was smart in pausing those when he got here, and then they've done a good job. And man, I mean, I'm sure they're sick of me talking to them about ticket prices because I do it constantly. I say, you got to give people a chance to say no. When you have tickets that are too expensive, it's too easy to say no now. We're seeing it all over the country. Look at the Iowa crowd, last week. People are saying that was the worst crowd they've maybe ever seen. Now that building's too big. This is also a whole nother podcast. But I'm like, you got to give people the reason to go, I'm just not going to make it, as opposed to, oh, that's how expensive it is, I'm not going. And the reason I bring all that up is because my family was sitting, like I said, in 223, where they usually sell those discounted, $20 tickets, sometimes $15 tickets. They are awesome seats. I mean, we were towards the top on benches in the corner, and I've sat there for other things. I remember going to the state tournament there. There are bad seats at Williams Arena if you're behind one of the pillars that are everywhere, or you're too far under the overhang. But if you're going, I don't want to sit in the upper deck, you're right there. You're right on top of it. My kids saw everything. My kids loved every minute of it. And those tickets are $20 each. So my family $100, you're in, done.
They started that last year. Was it last year they started those $20 or $15 reduced? And I was like, just get them in the building. And I know, the Gophers aren't the only school that does this, or the other, the other athletic team or whatever, because pro teams do. I know there's that fear of you sitting down next to a guy who paid $250 for his ticket and saying, hey, what'd you spend on yours? Oh, I got it for $30 or whatever.
Right.
And insulting him, like, well, why would I keep paying? You have them. That's not going to happen. They're not just
right.
That's kind of a false narrative, I think.
Yep.
I don't
they're
think
still paying for Gopher basketball tickets after the last few seasons. They are
diehard,
and they're not going.
You got them.
You can't hurt them anymore.
You can't hurt me.
You can't hurt them anymore. You can't. You're right, Chip. You're right. And to their credit, and now people, oftentimes they probably don't sell like I hope and dream that they would sell, but I feel like you just have to give people a chance in 2025 to think about the big walk up and go. Like, I got a text on Saturday morning from someone that said, hey, do you have any tickets? And I go, I don't. I have my own, but if you want to go, the get-in price is $20. And they're like, I'll see you there. Because you got to give people a chance, and it does matter. It really, atmospheres matter. I go to all these Big Ten schools. You guys go to all these Big Ten schools, like, especially for basketball, even like the home court and the home environment absolutely matters. So I'm glad. Yeah, they listened a year ago because it was the Michigan State home game a year ago where I just lost my mind.
That's what it was. Yeah.
I lost my mind, and it bothered me so much what I was seeing, what they were trying to get for people. And in the upper deck, lower deck, the whole bit, I'm like, you can't charge people that much on a Wednesday night at 8:00 and expect them to show up. You just can't do it. I know why you think you need to. You just can't do it. And we saw the crowd was okay for that Michigan State game with a big, I think they ended up winning. I can't remember, but probably not.
I remember writing a column about that because I looked at StubHub or something. Somebody sent me a link to look at what they're charging for these tickets. I'm like, this is
that might have been
no one's going to sit. It might have been you. Yeah, but
no
one's going to buy that ticket. They're just not at that price,
So this weekend they had a big, because I asked somebody, I said, because it was a great crowd. The crowd was awesome, right? Their best crowd of the season. And I said, how many people bought the discounted tickets? And they sent me back a really nice breakdown of, this was part of a Black Friday sale. This was a state fair special. We also bundled it with women's. Women had 7,000 on Sunday. Also, awesome. Best crowd. Yeah. Awesome vibe. And again, right from the jump, that place was ready. So I give them credit. I always want to give them credit when I think they do. And again, they're not always listening to me or us, but you have to try. You have to try to get people in there. And and it doesn't always work out because Minnesotans are slow to roll. That I don't want to do this. Yeah. We're all busy. We got 50 things going on every weekend, but I want to give them credit because they really worked it to get that game sold at a pretty good level, and they reaped the rewards for it. The crowd was amazing and absolutely helped them. Oregon got rattled.
It was a matter. It mattered. Yeah, I thought Oregon's, when they get dialed up there at the end, I mean, they took some hurried shots. They
threw the ball out of bounds.
Threw the ball, yeah. So I think it absolutely had an impact.
Well, as Chip has wrote over the years, a ranked team just doesn't walk into the barn with that kind of atmosphere and walk out with a win. The Star Tribune has said that many times over the years. I think you can validate that, Gaardsy.
Have you guys have you done the deep dive on the Iowa attendance problems yet? I know you like to cover things that don't happen here, especially players that play. I'm sure there's a Minnesotan on staff somewhere down there that's from, Kimball or something that we could talk about. Have we gotten the deep dive on why Iowa's not selling any tickets? I'm sure.
I don't know.
What are they on a 5-game losing streak now? 4-game losing streak?
Yeah, they got run out of Columbus last night too. It's not good.
I'm guessing you can find fans that have some thoughts on Fran at this point, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely can. All right. Anything else Gopher Hoops related before we talk a little football? I got a couple of things here to get to. We good? 11 o'clock Washington tip, by the way. I'll be in Los Angeles with the women, but I told Ben, I'm like, you need to do like bagels with Ben or something and get these kids out, man. Got to do breakfast with Ben, booze with Ben, get them going, because that's a big one too, right? 11 o'clock home game. You got to wake up.
How many 11 a.m. football games do they have this past year? Wasn't it just the one?
Not enough.
There were a couple.
You're going to make me look, but go on.
You can look. Well, all right. So let's transition to football quickly. And Chip, I figured it out. I cracked the code.
What is it?
Last Thursday, I cracked the code. Well, you remember we've been talking for like 6 weeks about how Burnsie reported it that Danny Collins was the new defensive coordinator, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody knew it. He's out there recruiting as the DC. We talked about it on the Pair and a Spare. Basically, the second that Corey Heatherman left a couple of weeks ago, we talked about it. We said Danny Collins is going to be the guy. And if you remember, Burnsie was so pissy about, well, they're never going to announce it. Well, I don't know what
we got to do it all together, Gaardsy. We can't, God forbid, we announce the defensive coordinator by himself if we know it's the guy, but we got to do it all together.
He was doing well. And for some reason, when he gets his Minnesota passive aggressive, and heaven forbid we have an announcement on the defensive coordinator because, none of us know who it's going to be. But Burnsie, you could tell, couldn't you tell it was just eating him up?
Yes.
You could tell it was just bothering him. Yeah. Well, I cracked the code.
Oh boy.
Last Thursday. And Burnsie, I'm sure you know where I'm going. I had to look back here. January 23rd, last Thursday, 1:01 p.m. from Gopher Football. Collins named defensive coordinator. Fleck announces changes to defensive staff. So I get that email. I think I even tweeted it at Burnsie, like, can you chill now or something? I said, are you happy now? And then I looked, and at 1:23 on that Thursday, actually 1:34, so 33 minutes later, GopherIllustrated.com, the rise of Danny Collins.
That didn't take long.
From sleeping in a storage closet to Minnesota's defensive coordinator by Ryan Burns. It's like, that's why he was so pissy.
He had a great story.
You know how it goes. He had the story sleeping in the storage closet. He didn't want Greeter getting to it. He didn't want Randy Johnson getting to it. He didn't want Daniel House getting to it. He didn't want Kane Robb. He didn't want Justin Gaard. He didn't want Mike Grimm, Chip Scoggins. Burnsie had it loaded in the draft. And all he had to do was add a couple of quotes and a little bit of color to the story, as you writers would say, and he fires it out. So to the charges, Ryan Burns.
Guilty as
plead
charged,
guilty?
Your Honor.
That's why you were so, I thought, unnecessarily aggrieved, but you had what you thought. And by the way, wonderful job. It's an awesome story.
Great story. Yeah.
Great story. I didn't know a lot of that stuff. And I think I'm going to have Danny on the Gopher podcast next week, and we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff. So thank you for making my job easier.
You're welcome.
But that's why you were so bitter about the whole thing, because you knew you had the 10 out of 10 defensive coordinator profile from your new guy, Danny Collins, and you just wanted to hit submit and get it out of your drafts.
I had that thing in the hopper for a while.
Yeah,
I had that thing ready to go for over a week, which before I get to that, I will say, guys, they had 5 11 a.m. games last year.
Yeah.
I thought they had like one. It's before I get the emails and tweets again, like I did for last week when I said Ohio State beat Oregon twice.
Yeah, don't worry about
lost
that.
their mind.
Yeah,
I'm aware. 5 11 a.m. games.
We can't be perfect. Well, they had so many night games. That's why it felt like that. Didn't they have 4 night games?
Yeah.
How many of those are on the road?
Illinois, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Rutgers.
Rutgers was 11.
Michigan. Yeah, essentially every road game was 11 a.m. last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Danny Collins story is just a good one. And that's where I'm very thankful for being able to go talk to him like 3 years ago to get those quotes where he was able to talk about things like that.
So you had that you've been waiting for this story for 3 years.
You've been sitting on that baby for 3 years.
You couldn't wait. You couldn't wait another week after.
Well, that's why we scratch and claw to get the assistants in the spring, because they do have good stories to tell.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
But for a guy like Danny Collins, who now I feel old because I believe he's 6 months older than me, and
you'll get over that quickly.
Yeah,
it happens fast.
That's after the Gophers just offered Donovan McNabb Jr.
Right.
What was your favorite Donovan McNabb moment? Was it throwing turf balls during his time here in Minnesota? So
it was when he fumbled twice against the Gophers, and Tyrone Carter housed him for a big upset in the Jim Wacker era. A game I was at. That was a night game. Saturday night at the Dome. It didn't get much better than that.
But Danny is just a story where I just think you can get behind, where there's no nepotism involved. I mean, he's just a guy who made a lot out of nothing. I mean, you talk to after I put out that story, I had some people from Western who worked with him back in the day reach out and be like, I can't believe he told you about those stories, because they're absolutely true, where he'd be in the facility sleeping in a storage closet and then getting up to go work the third shift and like packing trucks just to make it work, because he was a volunteer assistant, ends up working his way up the food chain. And now at the age of 32 years old, he is now the third youngest, I believe, defensive coordinator in Power 2. So it's one of those things where, I mean, you look across college football and so many times it's not about what you know, it's who you know, especially maybe in North Carolina. But it's one of those things where I think Minnesotans appreciate the blue collar attitude of something like that, where you just grind your way and see where you end up. And again, the Danny Collins thing is something I think we all can just get behind.
Yeah, I mean, Mace, used to always say, born on third base and think he hit a triple. Well, this is the exact opposite, right? This is a guy who believed in himself, had a passion for something that I'm sure there are people in his life that probably told him he's crazy. Go get a real job. Go, this is going to go nowhere. But he bet on himself, bet on his work ethic, bet on his belief that he could be a coach in this industry. And I love stories like that, where you're not given anything, but you earn everything. So good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Burnsie, clear the timeline up for me. So he started before PJ as a graduate student, or the first year that PJ was there at Western Michigan?
He started his time in the coaching ranks after PJ's first season. He was at Western, but he was able to watch the first season and get inspired by PJ, which I believe they were 1-11.
They were
0-12 that first year. I forget what they were.
How do you forget? PJ brings it up once a week. They were 1-11.
They're 1-11.
Yeah, they were 1-11.
They were horrific. How's that? Putrid? Do you want to keep me going on the adjective?
Yeah.
Oh, you're good.
Here?
Yeah.
But somehow he got inspired after watching that, joined them as a volunteer assistant because I didn't have anything open, and then just went from volunteer to graduate assistant to control guy to defensive analyst. And that's where then the whole Joe Rossi thing comes into play, where Joe Rossi's the failed defensive coordinator from Rutgers at the time. Danny Collins is like 26, never has gotten a shot. Those two grow close together. to the point where then when I think it's Harris Simiak left for Rutgers, Danny Collins is the one who gets elevated because Rossi gets to make that decision. And then the rest is now history, where he's gone all the way from the volunteer to now at the age of 32. He's the defensive coordinator, and they also hired him some help in Kevin Kane, who was the Purdue defensive coordinator last year. He's been a defensive coordinator for a while now. So you get him a little bit of help as a defensive analyst / outside linebackers coach. You guys don't want to hear me rant again about what do titles even mean in 2025 with some of these guys. But again, you get somebody with experience to let him kind of spread his wings like Greg Harbaugh did the last couple of years, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, speaking of Harbaugh, he tweeted out a great side-by-side picture of the two of them, because Harbaugh's basically the same story, right? I mean, he's a GA under Fleck and just works his way up, rejoins him for a while. But the two of them at Western Michigan, and then the two of them, I think, on the field, where was the bowl game? Charlotte, at the end of the game, basically going like, this is where we started together, and here we are. That's pretty cool.
Well, we don't need to go down the path about assistant coaches' salaries and all that again, but
we'll get to it.
I do think there is part of Fleck that loves developing coaches as much as developing players, and finding these GAs, finding former players, Winston, guys that he kind of brings along in his culture or his system. He doesn't like losing them, obviously, but I do think that he finds some satisfaction in being able to develop coaches. And
some of that's necessity, right? Because of what Burnsie always likes to talk about.
Well, it's like the guys they do bring from the outside, the say Joe Rossi's or the Corey Heathermans. They work out, but then they also leave. Where, like, I believe from talking with some people in the industry, Corey Heatherman's going to make 1.5 this year, 1.6 next year, and 1.7 the year after that. So he gets the additional year, and he's averaging 1.6 per, where he was going to make 1.2 here at Minnesota. It's like, okay, well, I can go hire a guy on the outside, and Flex actually had a pretty decent hit rate outside of Rob Smith and Mike Sanford. Or I can, I guess, reward the guy who's been with me since the days were bad and the days were long, and hope that if he does work out, that they can elevate both Harbaugh and Collins from the worst paid coordinators in the Big Ten to a level in which they would stay here at Minnesota, and they actually can get some continuity and some longevity at the coordinator spots.
Yeah. I think it helps he's got to do it a little bit, but he's also now got a track record of bringing guys through. And there's a lot of guys that have been with him a long time, right? Callahan's been with him forever. Matt Simon's been with him forever.
Mm-hmm.
Defense, was kind of, Rob Wenger, your guy, had been with him forever.
Sacramento State's own, baby.
Defense is a little bit more of a revolving door because that's not really what he's into, right? He's more into the offensive side and has let guys kind of go and do their own thing. But yeah, we tease Burnsie a lot, but he obviously had that story in the chamber for, basically half a decade. But it's worth going to read, because you learn a lot about the new DC and just why, I think, a window into why so many people have been high on him for so long, and why it was a pretty obvious no-brainer, especially given the timing of everything. Like, this guy deserves an opportunity to give it a shot. And like you say, I think he's the third youngest defensive coordinator. Like, this is what's happening now. You're either getting the super rich guys that have been around forever. I want to talk about that for a minute. Or
we'll get Jim Knowles.
You're getting young bucks that are getting their first crack. And even at the NFL, they've proven that they can do a good job.
Do you guys, Burnsie, do you think this will be a similar situation to Rossi and Heatherman, where PJ just says, that's your baby, run the defense? And if not, what do you think that'll look like? But and also get a sense of kind of what Danny's style will be, what his kind of philosophy will be.
Yeah, I can't see Fleck doing any more than what he normally does defensively. Again, Fleck's entire background is on the offensive side of the ball. And not to say he doesn't know defense, but he doesn't know it at the level that he knows offense. So I think it will be Danny Collins' thing, and that's where I think the Kevin Kane hire is going to make a lot of sense for those two to go back and forth, plus with the other assistant coaches. I think the hope would be this. It would be a defense that has Joe Rossi's details, where Joe Rossi, again, we heard for years talking to his players and just from different people around him, one of the most detail-oriented people you'll ever meet. Collins was with him for many years and learned that. But then you also pair it, I think, with Corey Heatherman's aggressiveness and kind of chaotic nature of it. So that would be my hope, is with the pieces they got coming back. Again, you got to fit the scheme to what your player strengths are. And I think they're cognizant of that. But with the defensive line they have coming back, with some of the issues or unknowns, I would say they have at places like corner, you would hope that they get a little bit more aggressive like they did with Heatherman last year in terms of trying to bring some pressure, knowing that they probably can't cover guys for 4, 5, 6 seconds, especially on the outside. But it's Rossi's details and Heatherman's aggressive, chaotic style would be what I'm hoping to see, I would say, from Collins.
Well, congratulations to Danny, and more important, congratulations to Ryan Burns from GopherIllustrated.com, because
you made it. You made it.
You can go work on your next great
My
feature.
consternation is now complete.
33 minutes. So how quickly was it just ready to go and you just had to get to your laptop, or how, take me in behind the curtain a little bit when you get the press release to, I can finally post this story and move on with the rest of my life?
Well, I think we had recorded that morning, and I was like, it's been 10 days. What are we doing?
You were so mad.
And then 4 hours later, they finally put it out.
So unnecessarily annoyed. It was just
he was so nervous that somebody was going to stumble across
that.
He was so nervous somebody was going to stumble across that story.
I mean, Greeter's good, but he can't fire out a feature that
Greeter's out. He's in like Greece.
Oh, yeah. So
you
were good.
Across.
Yeah, he's in like Lisbon.
Randy's got hockey on his plate. House is grinding Senior Bowl film somewhere from 2001, trying to find. I
don't know why you were so paranoid.
5th round pass rusher, but
God, it just
it was more so. Okay, they finally put it out. I wasn't at my laptop immediately, or else it would have been out at. What'd you say they released it at? 101.
101.
I would have been out at 102.
Yeah,
I wasn't at my setup.
Did you leave anything important to make sure you could, like, were you at lunch with your lovely wife or anything, or just and you bailed on her because you had to get the Danny Collins closet sleeping story out?
No, this life is not glamorous. The one that I leave here in my wife's house. No, it's she's on the main floor. I'm upstairs most of the time. We weren't on some glamorous lunch date. No,
Chip, I think you need to you're good at shadowing people and kind of taking us through their day. I think you need to take us into a football across Minnesota. Take us in a day of Burnsie, especially during like.
It's really boring during the day, more or less, and then at night,
waiting on phones.
It's so annoyed because it's just text messages and phone calls. That's nights and weekends, though. You guys know the life of sports.
Yeah, it's the life. Yeah, Chip won't be able to stay up that late. You'll have to wake him up. Hey, I got a text from that 3-star in Texas. I got to call him back right now if you want to jump on. But go and read it. It's very good. GopherIllustrated.com. Burnsie does a great job with that stuff, and a lot of cool stuff about the new defensive coordinator finally announced. So Burnsie can get some sleep on that front, Danny Collins. Will any of it matter, though, guys? Does any of this matter in the grand scheme of things with college football? When we get the news this week that Ohio State, the national champion, we knew that they don't care what they spend, but they clearly, and the outgoing athletic director, Gene Smith, admitted to it, basically said, I played poker with the football budget because I didn't want my legacy to be leaving on a team that couldn't win the Big Ten. So Ohio State literally spent more money than they made last year in football, which is incredible because Ohio State makes a lot of money. The Pair and a Spare podcast have learned. Columbus Dispatch reported that the athletic department at The Ohio State reported an operating budget or deficit of more than $37 million. They spent a record of $292.7 million from July 1, 23 to June 30, 24.
And that's just on football, to be clear here.
You think so?
Well,
no.
That's their entire athletic.
That's their entire athletic department.
That's the gaudy number. But
there's no way. Yeah,
it brought in revenue of $254 million. It declined from about $25 million. So even if they made what they made the year before, they still would have dipped in to about $12 million deficit. They've been planning for it. They didn't care about it. Ross Bjork, the AD now, says we knew this was going to happen. Gene Smith basically said, I left Ross kind of a financial mess, but you guys want to win a championship, we're going all in on football. Hiring Chip Kelly. They also fired their basketball coach, Chris Holtman. They had to pay him $9 million. They've got reserve funds, and they also know they're going to continue to make a lot of money. So that's how they're hedging this bet. But that's pretty incredible when a university just goes, we don't care if we're going to lose close to $40 million. We're going all in on football this year.
Yeah, and did you see, I read not the Dispatch story, but a different story about it, that they had 2 fewer home games.
Yeah.
That is a big deal for Ohio State. I mean, what do you think Ohio State brings in on a football Saturday?
Well, they say a drop off in football tickets was $16.5 million when they had 8 home games. So if you just do the math, it's about $8 million. $8 million a game at least.
So they only had 6 home games. So they must have played one of those big ones, non-conference.
Yeah, Burnsie can look up the schedule. I'm sure he's got it.
But then
again, fiscal year 24 would be fall of 23.
No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how much do you think that they talked about having reserves? I mean, if you're Ohio State and you have that kind of football revenues on it, most years I'm guessing you're stocking away some in savings. So, but a
$292 million expenditure is just such in a different stratosphere because like Minnesota, again, Eric Bigo does a great job in reporting on this stuff for Gopher Puck Live. I mean, Minnesota last fiscal year, now new data set from 2024, spent $152 million because they brought in 151. Can you imagine 37 million deficit and how the reaction would be here locally something like that?
I think $3 million would be insane.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not saying that they're wrong, because that is reckless spending, but it's what's important to them.
I go back to this. How are they going to pay that $21 million payout to athletes? Every school, not just Gophers.
Right.
Ohio State doesn't have to worry about it because if they had a $37 million deficit, $292 million spent, you're still north of $250 million in revenue. Right. They'll find money, but for a place like Minnesota, where the record revenue, record expenditures, 151, 152. Again, it's fascinating to kind of try and figure it out because that was one of the things within the data that Eric Bigo got from the latest fiscal year is Minnesota has never spent more on football with $47 million, but they've also never made more with $90 million in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that the math guy in me, the thing I like to look at year over year to try and figure it out is just profit. Again, revenue minus expenses. Well, here's the thing. The profit has never been higher for football. They made a profit of $43.3 million in fiscal year 24 compared to just 2 years ago where they got $32 million in profit. AKA the revenue continues to climb higher than the expenditures. And that's where I come back to, I lament assistant salary pools more than anybody on this planet. But it's like, if I now know that you're up 8 figures in profit year over year, essentially over 2 years for football, now it's just like, well, why can't we find the extra $300,000 to keep this guy? But in that same respect, Mark Hoyle is going to have to, I don't know what he's going to do for that 21 million chip because
that's
you
what's
look
coming
through it. Like they just built a brand new gymnastics building, track and field got new buildings, golf got a new building, tennis and hockey are set. And then we spent the first 15 minutes of the podcast today talking about the barn. And guess what? That's either going to have to be torn down or completely renovated. And that's going to be 8 figures. So you have all of that, yet you got to continue to feed the golden goose. And I don't know what Mark Hoyle is going to do here because I don't love seeing record profit for the football program, knowing what they continue to battle year over year with how lean they kind of have to take it. But I don't know what the solution is, boys.
That's going to be 9. The Williams Arena is going to be 9 figures, bud.
Yeah,
it's good.
I'm not a math guy, but I'm looking 200 million. That's 9 figures. I've got 333 with 2 commas. That's 200 million, right?
Yeah.
Is that I didn't know that's what they had estimated was 200 million.
They haven't. That's what I'm
Okay.
estimating conservatively. If I don't know, but let's say it's 100 million. I don't think you're going to do it for 50 mil.
Right. I was thinking 75-ish, but even still, that's a lot of money that you got to spread out over a decade or 2 decades or whatever. Plus you're still paying, they have so many expenditures. And again, they increased their revenue. Minnesota did about 15 million year over year, which is great. Again, you're up 10, 12%. but then your expenditures also grew at the same rate overall within the athletic budget. Plus, as to Chip's point, you have to be able to find now $21 million within the budget, and you got all these new buildings for non-rev. I don't know what Coyle is going to do here, and it's going to be kind of fascinating for me to try and figure it out.
And that I've said this for 10 years and it hasn't happened yet, but at some point there's got to be a ceiling on this TV money, right? I mean, there's got to be
not with the
bubble's
streaming
going to
services. And if they expand the playoff, that's going to be more money because they're going to expand the playoff.
Well, that's where like the biggest jump in revenue, or part of it, was ticket sales, which ticket sales were at an all-time high of 14 million for football this past.
That's great. That's really good.
Last fiscal year, which is great to see, which was a $2.3-ish million jump from the latest fiscal year. But media rights money was where they made the most. They went from 38 to 45.7.
Right.
That is the thing that feeds everything within this university.
So look at those numbers that you just brought up, because that checks out with what I had kind of heard before. We just mentioned that Ohio State football revenue per game looks to be about $8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Gophers, you just nailed it. 14 games divided by 7, I assume, is about 2 million, or 14 million divided by 7, about $2 million a game. Like, so every college football Saturday, Ohio State is making $6 million more than Minnesota. And I'm guessing Minnesota's at the lower end of ticket revenue, right? Because of capacity, because of all of that stuff. But it's just a race, man.
I can't wait to see the Ohio State fiscal year data for next year, by the way, after like 48 straight big noon games, which was the consternation of the entire country.
Yep.
Well, it is crazy when you go to, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State on a football Saturday. I remember years ago, up in the Michigan press box, they have that window at the end by the AD suite overlooking that golf course where they all park.
Yep.
And I remember standing out there with Maturi, just looking at all those cars pulled in. I think it was $20 a pop, right?
Yeah.
But it felt like a million cars pulled in there. Just looking out there, I was like, I wonder what that revenue would be like.
Yeah. I did that with Coyle at Penn State 2 years ago. We just looked out the back, and it's just blue and white as far
as you can see. I know.
You just don't even know where it ends, and they're doing that every single week. It's crazy. I did a quick Google here. The Galen Center, where USC plays it, which a lot of people think should be like the model for Williams Arena, because it's like a 9,000 seat stadium. It was brand new, from the ground up. That was about $130 million for cost. The renovation of Welsh Ryan, which also is great. Not a lot of people have had the privilege of going to Welsh Ryan Arena. Okay.
That is a privilege.
But 10 years ago, it was literally a high school gym with benches, and they had a few like purple seats for the big donors, but they completely renovated all that. They've got a nice club room now. I think it's like 7,500 attendance, something like that, which is a perfect number for them. Probably a perfect number for Minnesota. I wouldn't go any further than 10 if you remodel or do whatever, but that was $110 million. So, I mean, we're talking 9 figures, however you price it. But you're right. That's coming up. Like, where's that money going to come from? Can you get state funding for that? It's absolutely necessary. And I'll hear all arguments on whether they should tear it down or remodel it. I get it. It's got an emotional tie. I'd get it to 100 years, which is 2028. Have a great final season and go, we're playing at Mariucci for 2 years. We'll see you.
They're tearing it down.
Yeah. Or we're building it. There's a couple of different places they can build it still on campus, believe it or not. So we'll see. But yeah, the money thing is it's wild, man. It's just wild. And look at what Ohio State's doing. And then Ohio State, despite all of that, the transition, unless you guys want to talk about anything else, just lost their defensive coordinator for financial reasons to Penn State, which is crazy.
After Oklahoma thought they were going to get him, which this is A-level tier, maybe S-level tier agent work by Jim Knowles, agent, whoever it is, between Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Penn State. Because we got word, I think, during the national title game where Jim Knowles had been rumored to be talking to like Oklahoma?
Could be.
And then Tom Allen takes the Clemson job. And then they just all get into a bidding war for the Ohio State defensive coordinator. And he ends up going to Penn State for $3.1 million per year for 3 years.
After he signed an extension, right? He did the Heatherman. Yeah. I think he signed an extension with Ohio State.
How many I would love to know how many FBS coaches that's more than they make.
Oh, we could figure that out pretty easily.
Give me a second here.
And by the way, in the world of petty college football, because of all this, they did not allow Jim Knowles to go to the big ceremony when they got back to campus.
Isn't that
the big
beautiful?
Why
celebration.
would you? Why would you?
He's like, I'll just go. I just want to be with my guys. They're like, nope. Sorry, because I don't think they like how it went down, because I do think they try to take care of him. But obviously, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I don't blame anybody, but it does have to be annoying. Even if you're Ohio State, it's like, bro, like we
just won a national title.
We just won a national title. You've got every resource here. We're giving you. We just redid your deal, but I get it. I mean, it's hard to turn down that money. And to go and obviously Penn State's going all in. They're finally redoing their press box. I noticed that a couple of weeks ago. So I'm glad I got to be in that relic one last time. They're finally jumping up to actually have a functional place for media and suites and things like that on one of the sides of the end zone. But yeah, I'm sure they're annoyed at Ohio State, but I thought that was high-level pettiness to go, just go to State College, bro. Like, you can't even come to the ceremony. We'll send your ring to Happy Valley, or you can come pick it up.
$3.1 million mark, Chip. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Would rank 61st among all head coaches in college football. And I'll remind people there are 134 FBS coaches.
Jeez.
He makes more than half of the head football coaches in college football.
And you think there's not halves and have-nots in college?
Goodness gracious.
There's halves and have-mores. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. So anyway, that's going.
And I know a lot of people were asking, like, why would he leave Ohio State? Well, he already won the title.
$3.1 million. That's why.
There are $3.1 million reasons. But I believe he's also a Philly guy. The Pennsylvania native, which gets us back to the Kirk Shiraka angle of why he took, other than money.
It's amazing how much your hometown means to you when they're paying you way more money.
Apparently, these Pennsylvania guys, it means a lot to go to Penn State.
I'm telling you what, if the Cleveland Daily Banner shows up with
seriously,
a big check for me, I'll miss my hometown too.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And now Ohio State's going to get their pick of the lot too. Plus, I think Penn State's defense. I think Penn State is. I mean, when we start to actually get to it, when we look at the 2025 Big Ten, I think Penn State's probably the cream of the crop with everything they got coming back. Offensively, defensively, they are going to be loaded, absolutely loaded. But Jiminy Crickets, I just cannot fathom 3.1 million.
Yeah, I love that's a great saying. Yes, somebody did one of the national guys did one of those way too early preseason top 25. I think I saw Penn State was 4.
Well, I know I saw Nebraska on there because why not?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, they're probably too low in my opinion. Yeah.
Many people are saying that.
Yeah, surprised by the way, it's not working out for Indiana basketball. That's a stunner to bring it full circle to basketball. Weird that from everything I read, it was going back to Coach Knight days, and the NIL budget and all the things.
Speaking of not spending a ton of money, I would argue probably no one spent more money on their roster, maybe in college basketball, than Indiana.
Yeah,
look at how that's going.
Not quite working out, but I'm sure they'll be ranked. I'm sure they'll get the next great coach next year, and they'll be right back where everybody wants them in the top 25.
Dirt on Mike. Was it Mike Woodson's grade?
Well, I'm not. I'm just observing.
Okay, it's fine. It's okay.
I'm just watching what's going on. All right. Well, today Burnsie has a heart out, so we're going to get out of here on that. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pair and a Spare podcast. We appreciate Jack's Cafe and jackscafe.com. I'll remind you that we're about 2 weeks away from Valentine's Day. And that's a wonderful opportunity to that's a special occasion right there. If you've been thinking about a reason to go to Jack's and you want to include your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever, I can't imagine a better Valentine's Day vibe than Jack's Cafe, guys. Do we agree?
Absolutely. That's the place to take your partner, get the creme brulee, enjoy the parking, and say hi to Bill. Bill told me, and I'll tease it again, we got something cool coming for our listeners, and I want everybody to be there when we announce it. But Bill told me he loves when people come up and say, "Hey, I'm a fan of Pair and Spare. Listen, Pair and Spare. I want to meet you." So he loves when you guys introduce yourself to him. So make sure you do that.
Yeah, please do. He's always right there at the host stand, right at the end of the bar. And if he's not there, he'll be back momentarily because he might be seating another Pair and a Spare audience member to a table somewhere. All right. Thanks, everybody. Burnsie, congratulations again on your Danny Collins scoop. 6 years in the making.
I promise to not consternate as much.
I'm glad we finally got that. You got that one out of the chamber because I could just tell it was eating at you. And you finally got it. And I'm glad I did. That's how I spent my day. I don't have enough going on. I looked at timestamps to see how quickly Burnsie got that story up because it seemed quick. but I knew there had to be a reason why he was so unnecessarily
One of your national pastimes, gaslighting the absolute giblets and junipers out of me.
I know. I don't know why you do this every week, but I'm glad that you do. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a rating and review if you haven't. Please tell a college football fan or Gopher fan friend in your life about us, that we're here every single week. Thanks to Jack's Cafe. And we'll talk to you next week on the Parent and Spare podcast. Bye, everybody.